Hi, welcome back to our series of videos on migraine and science. Today we will talk about risk factor sensitivity, maybe the most important thing when it comes to understand and take control over migraine and its symptoms. As usual, let's start with a quick reminder. We already know that risk factors are stackable and pile up. And we know as well that as long as our risk exposure level remains below the migraine threshold, we stay free of symptoms. We also know that risk exposure level changes a lot, but how does risk vary? For each risk factor, risk exposure is the dose you're exposed to times your sensitivity. Let's analyze each of them, starting with the dose. The dose of risk is the quantity of risk you're exposed to. Let's take a few examples to illustrate this. For weather-related risk, the dose can be how much atmospheric pressure falls over an hour. For example, 0.03 inches of mercury per hour or 1 hectopascal or millibar per hour. For food chemical-related risk, the number of servings per meal. For example, if we're measuring tannins, as tea is rich in tannins, 1 cup of tea would be a serving. For stress-related risk, the level of stress per day. Your own assessment of how stressful the day was. Low, medium, or high, for instance. Sensitivity. Whereas the dose is the quantity of risk you're exposed to, sensitivity is a multiplier. The more sensitive you are to a risk factor, the faster the risk increases. Let's use a graph to see the impact of sensitivity. As usual, the red line is the migraine threshold. Below this line, no symptom. Symptoms appear when the migraine threshold is reached. In this example, we consider only one risk factor, tannins. Let's see the impact of one serving if we're highly sensitive to tannins. Risk increases sharply and quickly reaches the threshold. Symptoms appear after only 1 cup of tea. Note that after peaking, risk level slowly decreases over time. Let's now assume that we have medium sensitivity to tannins. After 1 cup of tea at breakfast, risk raises significantly, but way less than if we were highly sensitive, then slowly decreases. If we have tannins-rich berries at lunch, risk raises the same way and this time reaches a higher level, then slowly decreases. If we have a red apple at 4 p.m., risk raises once again and reaches an even higher level, then starts decreasing slowly. Finally, if we have chocolate after dinner, tannins-associated risk raises once more and this time reaches the threshold. Symptoms appear. In case of medium sensitivity, the accumulation of exposure builds up risk and may highly contribute to reaching the threshold after some time. So, the higher the sensitivity, the higher the risk of having migraine symptoms. With medium sensitivity, the risk is lower but accumulates when you're exposed to multiple doses over time. Quiz of the day. We saw that high sensitivity implies high risk and medium sensitivity implies lower risk. But what about low sensitivity? Does it imply answer A, low risk, or answer B, no risk? And why? You may want to pause the video for a few seconds to think about it. Exposure to low sensitivity risk, for example tannins, has very low impact on migraine risk level. But keep in mind that migraine risk is the sum of all risks associated to risk factors you're exposed to. If on top of tannins you're exposed to hormones and stress-related risks to which you have medium sensitivity, your overall risk increases and low sensitivity tannins may finally contribute to reaching the threshold. As a consequence, the correct answer is A, low risk. If you did answer A, did you guess why it was the correct answer? Please let me know in the comments. Key takeaways on risk factors sensitivity. For each risk factor, associated risk is the product of dose times sensitivity. The higher the dose, the higher the risk. The higher the sensitivity, the higher the risk. Be very careful with repeated exposure to a risk factor and with exposure to multiple risk factors. See you next time!